The reading room at Samuel Parker's law firm felt like a pressure cooker on the verge of exploding. 20 relatives were crammed into a space built for 10, and the tension in the air was almost physical. My father, Henry, sat in the front row, his $1,200 suit perfectly pressed, checking his Rolex every half minute, as if he had somewhere far more important to be. Beside him, my mother, Linda, held her designer purse tightly to her chest, her knuckles pale from the grip. She hadn't spoken to me since the funeral, only offering cold glances that said more than words. "This is taking too long," Dad muttered to his personal lawyer. "I have a board meeting at 3. Even at his own mother's will reading. Work still dominated his mind. That was Henry Miller in a nutshell. Someone who knew the price of everything but the value of nothing. My Uncle Charles stood against the wall, his size taking up space meant for two. The oldest of Grandma's 3 sons, he'd inherited her height but not her wisdom. His bloodshot eyes darted around the room, already calculating and spending money he didn't yet have. His third wife, Emily, a woman half his age, filed her nails, looking disinterested. She'd only known Grandma for 8 months, but was here ready to collect. 60 million, Charles whispered to his brother James. Even split 3 ways after taxes, we're still looking at 13 million each. James nodded, sweat forming on his forehead despite the air conditioning. The youngest son had spent his adult life chasing bets at casinos, always one gamble away from a big win. His ex-wife sat 3 rows back with their 2 teenage children, whom I'd only met once. Everyone wanted their share of Margaret Maggie Miller's empire. The side rows were crowded with cousins, distant relatives, and complete strangers. One person's new boyfriend was actually taking notes on his phone like he was already planning investments. It was revolt. 4 days after we'd buried Grandma, the vultures were circling. "Where is Samuel?" Dad demanded, his voice cutting through the whispers. "This is unprofessional." The door opened and Samuel Parker entered, carrying a leather folder. At 74, he moved with the calm confidence of someone who refused to rush for anyone. He'd been Grandma's attorney for 40 years. He'd seen her build her shipping empire from nothing and had been there through every victory and setback. His face revealed nothing, but when his eyes met mine, there was something, perhaps not sympathy, but understanding. "Thank you all for coming," Samuel began, setting the folder on the podium. "Before we start, I must remind everyone that Mrs. Miller's will was drafted with precision and is legally sound. Any attempts to contest it will be met with the full force of the law firm she helped build." Dad scoffed. "Just get on with it, Samuel. We all know why we're here." Samuel's jaw tightened, but he stayed composed. "Very well. The last will and testament of Margaret Maggie Miller, executed 8 months prior to her passing." The room fell silent. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for, the payday to fund schemes, solve problems, and satisfy greed. But I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about Grandma's hand in mine 4 weeks earlier, so light it felt like she was already halfway gone. I was thinking of the last sunset we watched together from her bedroom window, the way the light caught the tears on her cheeks when she said she was proud of me. None of these people had been there for that, not one. Samuel opened the folder and pulled out the first document. The paper looked formal, weighty with importance, but there was something else, multiple sealed envelopes, waiting. His fingers hesitated briefly on the final envelope, and when he looked up, his eyes locked on mine. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. With his first words, I knew Grandma had planned something none of us expected. Maggie Miller never did things conventionally, and she certainly wasn't starting now. 4 years ago, I was just another construction foreman in Seattle, managing crews on commercial sites, and returning to a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like whatever my neighbor was cooking. My days started at 6 a.m. with black coffee and blueprints, and ended at 8 p.m. with a beer and whatever game was on TV. It was simple, predictable, and I was fine with it. My relationship with my family had always been like a puzzle with missing pieces. Dad, Henry Miller, was a high-powered investment banker who moved us from Seattle to San Francisco when I was 15, then moved himself back to Seattle when I was 18, leaving me to figure out college alone. He sent money but never time or presence. Our conversations lasted only long enough for him to confirm I wasn't embarrassing the family name. "You're working construction?" he'd said when I told him about my job after earning my business degree. "That's beneath you. I like building things," I replied. "Things that last." He hung up without saying goodbye. That was 3 years before Grandma got sick. Mom, Linda, was even more distant. She married Dad for his last name and the status it brought. She spent her days at the country club planning fundraisers she couldn't name and appearing in society pages. When I was younger, she sometimes looked at me as though I were an accessory she'd forgotten she owned. My uncles had their own forms of failure. Charles, the eldest, burned through 5 marriages and 5 businesses, each collapse more dramatic than the last. He could make anything sound like a sure thing, until it wasn't. James lived like life was one long Vegas weekend. He called me maybe once a year, always for a small loan we both knew he wouldn't repay. Then came the October morning that changed everything. I was reviewing permits when my phone rang. Grandma Maggie's name on the screen was unusual enough to make me step outside. "Ethan, sweetheart," she said, her voice carrying a weight I'd never heard before. "I need to see you. Can you come this weekend?" "Of course, Grandma. Everything okay?" "We'll talk when you get here." The drive to Cannon Beach usually took over 2 hours, but I made it in under 140. Her oceanfront mansion sat on a bluff over the Pacific, a 30-room timber and glass home she'd built in 1995, after her company went international, but she wasn't in any of the grand rooms. I found her in the kitchen making tea as if the world wasn't shifting beneath her feet. "Pancreatic cancer," she said simply, pouring me a cup. "Stage 4. 20 months if I'm lucky." The mug burned my hands, but I held it anyway. "What about treatment? Second opinions?" "I'll fight it," she said, sitting across from me at the same breakfast table where she'd fed me pancakes every Sunday as a child. "But I need someone with me, someone I trust. Your father's already asking about power of attorney. Your uncles are circling like sharks. I need someone who cares about me, not just my bank account." "I'll move in tomorrow," I said without hesitation. "Ethan, your job, your life in Seattle. You're my family, Grandma, my real family. The job will wait." She reached across the table, her fingers fragile, but her grip still firm. "You know what I remember most about you? When you were 7, there was a boy at school. Oliver, I think. His father lost his job, and he stopped bringing lunch. You gave him your lunch money for a month. You came home hungry but never said a word. I only found out because his mother called to thank me for raising such a kind boy. I didn't know you knew about that. Mothers always know, sweetheart, and grandmothers know even more. That's when I realized you understood what really mattered. Not money, not status, but showing up for someone who needs you." That night, I called my boss for indefinite leave. I packed my apartment in 6 hours, and by the next evening, I was unpacking in one of Grandma's guest rooms, ready for whatever came next. Neither of us knew then it would be 20 months of revelation, heartbreak, and the ultimate test of what family really means. The first sign of trouble came a week later. Dad's Mercedes pulled into the driveway at 8 a.m. He walked in without knocking, carrying a briefcase full of documents. "Mother, we need to discuss your assets," he announced, ignoring me at the breakfast table. "With your diagnosis, it's crucial we protect the estate from taxes." Grandma set down her coffee cup slowly. "Henry, I haven't seen you in 8 months, and your first words aren't even hello?" "This is important," he insisted, spreading papers across the table. "Sign here and here. Just transferring some assets into protected trusts. Standard procedure." She picked up one of the documents, read it carefully, then slid them all back to him. "These trusts would give you control over my accounts immediately. Someone needs to manage things if you become incapacitated. I have cancer, Henry, not dementia. And I have Samuel for legal matters. Now, would you like breakfast with your son and me? Or did you come here just to try to take my money?" His face reddened. "I'm trying to help you." "No, you're trying to help yourself. That's different. I taught you that long ago, though apparently the lesson didn't stick." He grabbed his papers and stormed out. Through the window I saw him making a phone call, before driving away. Within an hour, Mom called. Maggie, dear. Her voice oozed full sweetness. Henry's just concerned. Perhaps I should visit. Help with arrangements? Linda, you haven't set foot in this house in 3 years. Don't start pretending now. The line went dead. Grandma turned to me with a sad smile. The vultures smell death. Ethan, watch how quickly they circle. She was right. Over the next 4 months, the attempts grew more aggressive. Uncle Charles showed up one night reeking of bourbon, pounding on the door at midnight. I need $60,000, he shouted. When I opened it, my restaurant's failing. She's sitting on millions while her son loses everything. Go home, Charles. You're drunk. You little leech, he snarled, jabbing a finger at me. Playing the good grandson while we all know you're just waiting for your payday. How much is she promising you? 10%? 20? I'm here because I love her. Love? He spat the word. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't save businesses. Get her down here or I'm coming in. I blocked the doorway. Try it. We stood there, uncle and nephew, family divided by greed and principle. Finally, he stepped back. This isn't over. That money belongs to her sons, not some charity case grandson. The worst part was Grandma heard everything. I found her sitting by her bedroom window, tears on her cheeks. Did I fail them that badly? She whispered. How did my boys become such strangers? Uncle James's approach was different, but equally cruel. He hired a psychiatrist to evaluate Grandma, claiming she wasn't mentally fit to manage her affairs. The doctor arrived unannounced one Tuesday afternoon. I'm here for Maggie Miller's cognitive assessment, he said. Grandma stood in the doorway, frail but fierce. Young man, I built a shipping empire from nothing, negotiated with unions and government officials, and ran board meetings until last year. I can still beat anyone here at chess, recite Shakespeare from memory, and balance my own checkbook. Now leave before I call the police and my lawyer. The doctor left, but James didn't stop. He called Adult Protective Services, accusing me of exploiting her. The investigation humiliated Grandma. She had to prove to strangers she was staying in her own home by choice. Meanwhile, her health deteriorated. Chemotherapy ravaged her body. Some days she couldn't get out of bed. I managed her medications, changed IV bags, helped her to the bathroom. The work was hard, but the emotional toll was worse. Watching a woman who'd built an empire, reduced to hoping just one of her children would visit without an agenda. Mom sent flowers every month with identical cards. Thinking of you, get well soon. Linda, never a visit, never a call. Grandma asked me to donate the flowers to the hospital. Someone should get comfort from my children's gestures, even if I can't. The betrayals piled up like winter snow, cold and suffocating. Each broke her heart, a little more until I feared she'd die of disappointment before cancer took her. But through it all, she kept planning, meeting with Samuel, making arrangements she wouldn't discuss. 8 months before she passed, everything changed. One gray February morning, Samuel Parker's Lincoln Town car pulled into the driveway. He carried a thick leather portfolio and a recording device. His expression said, "Ethan, I need you to give us privacy," Grandma said. Already dressed in her best navy suit, despite rarely leaving bed, Samuel and I have business to discuss. They locked themselves in her study for 4 hours. I heard papers shuffling, pens scratching, Samuel's low voice and Grandma's clear responses. When they emerged, Samuel looked at me with an unreadable expression. "Your grandmother is a remarkable woman, Ethan," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Remember that no matter what happens in the coming months, trust the process." After he left, I found Grandma staring at the ocean. Documents were spread across her desk, but she gathered them quickly into a locked drawer. "What was all that about?" I asked. "Insurance," she said simply. "Making sure the right things happen for the right reasons." Over the next weeks, Grandma seemed energized. She began documenting everything. Every missed visit, every manipulative call, every attempt to reach her money. She had me install a recording system for the house phone. "All legal for medical emergencies," she said with a wink. The recordings revealed more than we expected. Dad calling her doctor trying to get information about her mental state. James attempting to bribe her housekeeper for financial statements. Charles was on a three-way call with both brothers, planning to contest any will that didn't split everything equally. "The old bat can't last much longer," he said on one recording. "We just need to make sure the kid doesn't manipulate her into anything stupid." "I've got my lawyer ready," Dad added. "The second she dies, we file to freeze all assets. Ethan won't touch a penny." Grandma listened to those recordings with me. Her face barely changed, but her hand shook as she took notes. "They're not even pretending anymore," she said quietly. "At least now I know where we all stand." After that, the decline sped up. The cancer spread to her liver and bones. Hospice arrived in mid-April. I took complete leave and slept on a cot in her room, ready if she needed anything at night. Those final weeks were brutal and beautiful in equal measure. Pain kept her awake and we talked for hours. Her childhood in the Depression, eating flour soup and wearing cardboard shoes. How she started the company with 2 trucks and a loan from a fisherman who believed in her. Her first million. Celebrated alone because her husband had already died, and her sons were too young to understand. One night she said, morphine making her voice soft, "I wanted to give them everything I never had, but somewhere along the way I gave them everything except what mattered. Values, compassion, the idea that money is a tool, not the goal." 2 weeks before she died, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Ethan, promise me something. When Samuel reads the will, no matter what happens, don't defend me. Don't explain my choices. Let them react. Let them show who they are." "Grandma, what did you do?" I asked. "I'm setting things right, or as right as I can now. Just promise me you won't interfere. Let Samuel handle everything." "I promise," she smiled. The first real smile I'd seen in weeks. "You're going to be okay, sweetheart. Better than okay. You're going to understand what real wealth means." She passed on a Monday evening, watching the sunset turn the ocean gold and pink. Her last words were steady. "The truth always surfaces, Ethan. Like oil on water, it always rises to the top. Watch for it." The obituary ran in 4 newspapers. Within hours, relatives I'd never heard of were calling about funeral arrangements. Dad flew in from San Francisco the next morning, already in black and already calculating. Mom arrived separately, making sure society photographers captured her grief. My uncles came together as a united front of entitlement. At the funeral, everyone performed well. Dad's eulogy about family values would have been touching if I hadn't heard him call her a stubborn old fool on the phone. A week earlier, the tears and anecdotes rang hollow. Samuel announced the will reading for the following week. The vultures circled immediately. I waited, trusting whatever Grandma had planned. The conference room at Samuel Parker's firm could have been a stage set for a play about greed. Every seat was taken. People stood against walls to avoid missing a single word. Dad sat in front with his personal lawyer, who kept checking documents on a tablet. Mom brought her financial advisor, a nervous man adjusting his tie. Uncle Charles cracked his knuckles, and James sweated through his shirt despite the cool air. Samuel arrived precisely at 2, carrying the same leather portfolio from 8 months earlier. He set it down, adjusted his glasses, and looked steadily at each person. Someone who'd seen every kind of family drama in 40 years of practice. "Before we begin," Samuel said, "I remind everyone Mrs. Miller executed this will 8 months ago, while of sound mind, witnessed by 3 medical professionals and 2 independent attorneys. Any attempt to contest it will be met with the full resources of this firm." Dad's lawyer opened his mouth, but Samuel raised a hand. "Please hold questions until I finish reading the complete document." He pulled out the first paper. The last will and testament of Margaret Maggie Miller, dated February 15 of this year. He read on. "To my son Henry, I leave my complete collection of family photographs stored in albums in the study. Every birthday, every Christmas, every family gathering you missed while building your fortune. Perhaps looking at them will help you understand what you traded for your success." Dad's face flickered from expectation to confusion to fury in seconds. "Photos, that's it. Samuel continued. To my son Charles, I leave my personal recipe book, including recipes for every meal you claimed you could improve but never cooked for me. May you learn that talking about doing something and actually doing it are different. Charles leapt up. His chair toppled. This is insane. Where's the money? To my son James, I leave my antique deck of playing cards. The ones my father used to teach me that gambling with family love is the only bet you're guaranteed to lose. James's face turned purple. She's mocking us. This is a joke. To my daughter-in-law, Linda, Samuel read on, I leave my collection of costume jewelry, 25 pieces that look expensive but are worth little, much like the affection you showed me over the years. Mom gasped, her hand flying to the real pearls at her throat. The room erupted. Angry voices, threats, accusations. Samuel waited for the noise to subside, and then produced a second envelope. To my grandson Ethan Miller, I leave my 1950 Cadillac coupe, purchased with the first profit from my business. It still runs because it was maintained with care, not money. Like love, it only needed consistent attention to last. Every eye in the room burned into me. That's all? Dad shouted. Where's the $60 million? The oceanfront property, the shipping company, the portfolios? Samuel pulled out a thick document. Ah, yes. The estate valued at $60 million. I have a complete financial disclosure executed 8 months ago. The room fell so silent you could hear the air conditioner. He explained. 4 years ago, after her diagnosis, Mrs. Miller began liquidating assets. She sold the shipping company to employees for $1, with a provision that profits for the next decade go into their retirement funds. She converted investments in properties into cash, $60 million. Where is it? Charles breathed. Samuel smiled, the first real emotion he'd shown, and distributed the funds, $35 million, to establish the Miller Foundation for Childhood Cancer Research, focusing on pancreatic cancer in children. $10 million to fund full college scholarships for 250 first-generation students from working families. $6 million distributed among 15 food banks and homeless shelters in California and Oregon. $3 million to Doctors Without Borders. The silence was complete. Samuel continued. The oceanfront mansion was sold to California State Parks for $1 to become a public beach access and nature preserve. By Miss Miller's instruction, it would be named the Ethan Miller Preserve, honoring the only family member who understood the idea that the best views shouldn't be reserved for those who can afford them. No, Dad whispered. She couldn't have. We're her children. That money was ours by right. Samuel produced one final document. There is one more bequest. $1.5 million remains in a trust with Mr. Ethan Miller as sole trustee. This money can only be used for medical care and support for any family member who becomes ill and has no one else to turn to. As Mrs. Miller wrote, Ethan will help even those who don't deserve it, because that's who he is. This trust ensures he can afford to keep being himself. Chaos erupted. Dad lunged across the table and grabbed Samuel's collar. You helped her do this. This is fraud, manipulation, elder abuse. Samuel, unfazed, said, There are security cameras recording this assault, Mr. Miller. Sit down. Uncle Charles was on the phone with his lawyer, screaming about incompetence and undue influence. James kicked a chair across the room. Mom looked pale, calculating a fortune that no longer existed. We'll destroy you, Dad, promised, pointing at me. You poisoned her against us. You stole our inheritance. I didn't know, I said quietly. I had no idea she'd done any of this. Liar. Charles roared. 4 years living with her and you expect us to believe you didn't know. Samuel interjected. Mr. Ethan Miller was never informed of these decisions. Mrs. Miller insisted on that. She wanted his care to be genuine, not motivated by knowledge of an inheritance. There are sealed affidavits from witnesses confirming he was never present for any financial discussions. They left one by one, hurling threats like confetti. This isn't over, Dad warned. I'll spend whatever it takes to break this will. Good luck with that, Samuel replied calmly. You'll be fighting the American Cancer Society, 250 scholarship recipients, and the state of California. I'm sure that will play well in the press. When they'd gone, Samuel handed me a sealed envelope. She wanted you to read this alone. I drove to what used to be Grandma's mansion, now marked with a new sign, Future Home of Ethan Miller Preserve, opening next summer. I sat on the bluff where we'd watched sunsets and opened her letter. My dearest Ethan, it began. If you're reading this, then Samuel has delivered my final lesson to our family. I'm sorry you had to see their true colors, but you needed to. DNA doesn't make a family. Love does. The money would have destroyed them. If I'd left them millions outright, they'd have fought until lawyers took most of it. If I'd left them nothing, they'd have assumed manipulation. So I gave them tokens that look like something but mean nothing. They got what they earned. You got what you earned too. Not millions, because you never wanted that. You got the truth, that you are not like them. You proved that when someone needed you, you showed up. You are the name on something that will bring joy to families for generations. The $1.5 million trust isn't really for them. We both know they'll never ask you for help. It's for you to use to help people who actually need it. I know you will. You've been doing it your whole life, usually with less. Your real inheritance is freedom. Freedom from wondering if you're like them. Freedom from their poison. Freedom to live knowing you chose love over money. That choice made you wealthy in ways they'll never understand. Live well, my sweet boy. Build things that last. Love people who deserve it. The fortune I spent my life accumulating was only worth something when I gave it away to people who'd use it right. All my love, Grandma Maggie. That was 4 years ago. The lawsuits all failed just as Samuel predicted. Dad doesn't speak to me. Mom moved to California to reinvent herself. Uncle Charles filed for bankruptcy again. Uncle James vanished somewhere in Nevada. The trust has already helped 20 families, construction workers' children with cancer, a janitor's wife needing heart surgery, real people with real problems who just needed someone to care. Each time I write a check, I think of Grandma smiling, knowing she turned her fortune into something that mattered. Last week, the preserve officially opened. Hundreds of families came on the first day. Kids built sandcastles where Grandma's rose garden used to be. Teenagers played volleyball where the fountain once stood. An elderly couple sat on a bench sharing sandwiches, watching the sunset from the exact spot where Grandma and I used to play chess. A little girl ran up to me, pointed at the sign and asked, "Is that you, Ethan?" "That's me." "Why is your name on the park?" My grandma wanted everyone to have a beautiful place to watch the ocean. She sounds nice. Is she here? I looked at the waves and the families. Faces that would never know Maggie Miller's name, but who would benefit from her final act against greed. "Yeah," I said, looking out at the ocean. "She's here." If this story touched you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that family isn't only about blood. It's about who shows up when life gets hard. Drop a comment below about what real wealth means to you, and if you want more stories about family redemption and the unexpected ways love shows up, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and remember, the best inheritance you can leave or receive isn't money. It's the knowledge that you were truly loved,